You know, I grew up with people who were all about telling other people about Jesus. That's what, it's like they existed to tell other people about Jesus. And they wanted to make sure that other people who knew Jesus were telling people who didn't know Jesus about Jesus. You know what I'm saying? These are these people that are like completely wanting to tell people about Jesus. And then they would want other people to tell people about Jesus. And their tactic for getting more people to tell people about Jesus was guilt. And they would say things like, if you're not sharing Jesus with the people at the gas station, well, I don't know if you're really a Christian or not. You know, or maybe they go around knocking on doors, you know, and saying, if you're not knocking on doors and asking people if they're going to hell, then I'm not sure that you really love Jesus. So they're all about evangelism. I don't know if you've heard that word before, evangelism, or what you even think of that word. If you've been around the church for a while, when you hear the word evangelism, maybe it just kind of conjures up these images in your mind. Maybe it does give you this picture of somebody knocking on doors, or maybe when we say evangelism, you get this picture of somebody on a street corner barking out to people how they're going to hell and how they're terrible people. What do you think of when you think about evangelism? And you may say, well, I'm not an evangelist. Nobody does evangelism really much. Preachers do, but no, not an evangelist. Everybody, in some form or another, I think, is an evangelist. Because evangelism simply means this: to speak what's in your heart. That's my definition of evangelism, to speak what's in your heart. So I'm kind of a motorcycling evangelist. Like, I love to talk about motorcycles and talk about motorcycling experiences and talk about equipment and all that kind of stuff. And I have friends who are motorcycle evangelists, and maybe you do too. I know some people who are decorating evangelists, and they're all about Pinterest and getting the word out and sharing things and doing all this. And have you seen this and seen that? And I got to go to Covered Bridge so that I can get my decorating stuff. They're decorating evangelists. That's what's in their heart they want to tell other people about, right? They want to speak what's in their heart. Maybe you've met people who are shoe evangelists. And they just love the shoes and got to buy the shoes and tell people about the shoes. Maybe you meet people who are gardening evangelists. I don't know. It's just whatever's in your heart. My wife's grandfather was a knife evangelist. He didn't have a business card that said knife evangelism, but he was a knife evangelist. That is, he was so into knives, and you couldn't be around him very long, that you would know about that. He collected knives over his entire life. And so there was kind of this joke going to Grandpa's house that was like, don't ask him anything about knives, because if you did, it would open this door of his heart, boom, and it would all spill out, and he would show you all his knives, tell you about all his knives, the entire collection. He was a knife evangelist, meaning that what was in his heart would come out. So Webster defines evangelist as this: a person who tries to convince people to become a Christian. That's the Christian definition of evangelist, a person who tries to convince somebody to convince people to know Jesus, or again, tries to convince people to become a Christian. I think evangelism is simply this. Evangelism is this: to speak what's in your heart, because everything leaks from your heart. So don't speak to other people about Jesus out of guilt. That's not really going to go very far. Okay? You speak out of your heart, out of a love that you have for God and out of a love that you have for them. So today in C Group, you're going to talk about this whole idea of evangelism, this whole idea of spilling out in our heart the gospel or the good news about Jesus. So we're going to look at Romans chapter 9 and chapter 10. And as you do, you're going to see that Paul has this great enthusiasm for the Jew and the Gentile. Now, let me give you a little history on Jew and Gentile that will help you in your discussion today, okay? Now, the Jews were, in the Old Testament, God's chosen people. You'll read that in the Old Testament. It talks about them being God's chosen people. God led them out from Pharaoh, where they were all enslaved. You remember the story? Moses comes in, leads Israel out. They become a Jewish nation, and God is all about them. And they turn away from God, and then they turn back to God. And then they turn away from God, then they turn back to God. And it's just like this kind of repeating cycle in all of that. Well, they established laws and guidelines and 10 commandments and all those things. And they said, in order for you to be saved, here was their evangelistic speech. In order for you to be saved, you have to do all of these things. They were all about the law and all about doing all of these things. That was the Jews. Also a group called the Gentiles. So as Jesus is dead, buried, resurrected, and then ascends to the Father, the church starts out, and the Holy Spirit, through the work of the disciples and the apostles, opens up the gospel story not only to Jews, but to Gentiles. And so you're going to hear Paul talk about Gentiles. Now the gospel was open to them, And they're not used to the law. They weren't used to following all the law that the Jews were. And they felt that there was this new covenant that Jesus established, which we know now as the new covenant. And they decided, and through the Holy Spirit, that what they really needed was faith. And so you're going to explore faith and evangelism and all that. So today, as you dig around Romans 9 and 10, you'll find that Paul is talking to the Jews, but he's also talking to the Gentiles. But don't get lost in all of that. What I really want you to see is the heart of Paul is the heart of a man who is passionate for all people, Jew and Gentile, and he wants them to know, more than anything else, he wants them to know Jesus. And he does it from a place where his heart is full of Christ, is full of what Christ has done for him. And so he speaks to Jew and Gentile, not out of guilt, not out of shame, but out of this place of love.